Oh my
What if I told you that three friends witnessed a murder happen right before their eyes, and they were powerless to stop it? What if I told you this wasn't through a window or across the street, but through their phone screens during what started as an ordinary FaceTime call on a Wednesday evening in West Palm Beach, Florida? This isn't fiction. This isn't a horror movie. This is the devastating reality of what happened to 18-year-old Kelvie McRae in 2024, when love turned into obsession, and obsession turned lethal. Her story will shake you to your core, but more importantly, it might just save your life. Every 24 hours in America, 3 women lose their lives to domestic violence. That's 75 women every single month who never make it home to their families. But here's what makes Kelvie's case absolutely heartbreaking. She had already escaped once. She had called 911 just 24 hours earlier. She had pressed charges. She had done everything right. Yet somehow, the system that was supposed to protect her failed in the most catastrophic way possible. And when her ex-boyfriend Kayshawn Shaw decided that if he couldn't have her, nobody could, 3 innocent friends became unwilling witnesses to an unthinkable act of violence. Kelvie McRae wasn't just another statistic. She was a rising star, a beautiful, intelligent 18-year-old model and beautician with thousands of followers on Instagram. She had an entrepreneurial spirit that her family described as unstoppable. She was the kind of young woman who lit up every room she entered, with dreams bigger than her small Florida town. But behind her radiant smile and successful social media presence, Kelvie was trapped in a nightmare that millions of women know all too well. She was living with the very person who would ultimately take everything away from her, including her life. On that fateful Wednesday evening, 19-year-old Kayshawn Shaw made a decision that would destroy 2 families forever. In a final, desperate act of control, he walked into the room where Kelvie was laughing with her friends on FaceTime and pulled the trigger. Not once, but multiple times, shooting her in the head, back, and neck before turning the weapon on himself. If this story resonates with you or someone you know, stay with me, because by the end, you'll have life-saving information that could prevent this from happening again. Your engagement with this video could literally save a life. At just 18 years old, Kelvie McRae had already built what many would consider a dream life. She wasn't just another teenager scrolling through social media. She was creating content that inspired thousands. As a professional model and skilled beautician, Kelvie had cultivated a substantial Instagram following who looked up to her for beauty tips, lifestyle inspiration, and that infectious energy she radiated in every post. Her feed was a carefully curated glimpse into a life filled with promise. Professional photo shoots showcased her natural beauty, while behind-the-scenes content revealed her work ethic and business acumen. Kelvie wasn't just posing for pictures. She was building a brand, establishing herself as an entrepreneur in the competitive world of beauty and fashion. What set Kelvie apart wasn't just her stunning looks. It was her drive and intelligence that truly made her shine. Her uncle Ricky Aiken would later tell reporters that Kelvie was as beautiful as she was smart, a testament to the young woman who balanced her modeling career with her passion for the beauty industry. She had that rare combination of natural talent and relentless work ethic that promised a bright future. Friends and family described her as having a flair for life, someone who approached every opportunity with enthusiasm and determination. Whether she was perfecting a new makeup technique, planning her next photo shoot, or engaging with her online community, Kelvie threw herself wholeheartedly into everything she did. Her entrepreneurial spirit was evident to everyone who knew her. Kelvie's social media presence painted the picture of a young woman who had the world at her fingertips. Her posts showed glamorous photo shoots, successful business ventures, and moments of pure joy with friends and family. To her thousands of followers, she represented everything a modern 18-year-old could aspire to be: independent, successful, and radiantly happy. The cruel irony wasn't lost on those who knew her story. Here was someone so connected to the world, sharing her life with thousands of people daily. Yet she was silently enduring a private hell that none of her followers could see. Behind the perfectly filtered photos and inspiring captions, Kelvy was fighting a battle that would ultimately cost her everything she had worked so hard to build. In the weeks leading up to that tragic Wednesday evening, Kelvy's life appeared completely normal to the outside world. She continued posting content, engaging with her followers, and pursuing her dreams with the same passion that had always defined her. Her friends would later recall how she seemed to be moving forward, focusing on her career and future plans. But within the walls of her West Palm Beach home, a different reality was taking shape. The very place that should have been her sanctuary had become a prison, shared with someone who refused to accept that their relationship was over. While Kelvy projected strength and independence to the world, she was quietly navigating a dangerous situation that would soon explode into unthinkable violence. Kayshawn Shaw wasn't a stranger lurking in dark alleys, or a random predator who targeted Kelvy from afar. He was 19 years old, someone she had once loved, someone she had trusted enough to share her home with when he had nowhere else to go. This is the most terrifying reality of domestic violence. The monster often wears a familiar face. Shaw had been part of Kelvy's world for an entire year. He knew her routines, her friends, her fears, and her dreams. He had access to her most vulnerable moments and intimate spaces. When someone you love becomes your greatest threat, escape becomes infinitely more complicated and dangerous. For 12 months, Kelvy and Kayshawn had shared what she believed was a loving relationship. But when Kelvy finally found the strength to end things, Shaw's mask began to slip. He simply could not accept that the woman he claimed to love had the right to choose her own path forward without him. The breakup should have been the end of their story, but for Shaw, it was just the beginning of a deadly obsession. He refused to move on, constantly asking Kelvy to reconsider, to give him another chance. What he called love was actually something far more dangerous, a need to possess and control another human being completely. Here's where Kelvy's compassionate nature became a deadly trap. When Shaw found himself with nowhere to live, she made a decision that would ultimately cost her everything. She allowed him to stay in her home. It was an act of kindness that he would exploit in the most horrific way possible. This living arrangement gave Shaw unprecedented access to Kelvy's daily life. He could monitor her movements, her phone calls, her visitors. What should have been her safe space became a prison where every action was scrutinized by someone who refused to accept their relationship was over. Kelvy's generosity had inadvertently handed her abuser the perfect opportunity to escalate his control.
Family and friends of a teenager killed in West Palm Beach honoring her life tonight after police say Kelvy McCrae was shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend. Hundreds of her friends and family came together on Singer Island. Our Joe Lopez was there as loved ones gathered tonight.
Family says that Kelvy loved the beach and the color purple, so what better way to honor her as they said their goodbyes.
Hundreds of friends.
We miss you, Kelvy.
And family.
She was everything to me.
Fought back tears.
It's going to be tears of joy. We had a happy daughter.
As they filled the Riviera Beach Municipal Beach Park, wearing Kelvy McCrae's favorite color, purple and pink, a week after police say she was shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend, Kayshawn Shaw.
I hear the shots every day. I see her on the floor every day.
Marla McKinney is Kelvy's mom, who said she was home when her daughter was killed.
It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
She has found strength in love and support from those that knew her daughter.
This is her personality. And she was a people's person. Everyone loved her.
A love guided by candlelight down to the beach.
It means everything to me. It means everything to me, and I know it means everything to her too, in spirit.
Family and friends say that Kelvy and Shaw had broken up and that he wasn't taking it well. Family says that Shaw was on police's radar, but according to police, Shaw ended up shooting and killing Kelvy and then himself.
They let a guy that choked my daughter, put a gun to her head, get away.
They catch this guy the day before none of this happened.
West Palm Beach police says the day before the shooting, they were looking for Shaw and were even following him in his car, but he got away. Reporting on Singer Island, Joe Lopez, WPTV, News Channel 5.
The red flags that had likely existed throughout their relationship now exploded into full view. Shaw's behavior escalated from persistent pleading to outright intimidation. He began using fear as a weapon, making it clear that he would rather see Kelvy dead than see her happy without him. The pattern is tragically predictable. When an abuser realizes they're losing control, they often resort to increasingly desperate and violent measures. Shaw's obsession had transformed from wanting Kelvy back to ensuring that if he couldn't have her, nobody else could either. This shift from possession to destruction marks the most dangerous phase of domestic violence, when love becomes completely indistinguishable from hatred. The psychology behind Shaw's actions reveals the fundamental difference between love and possession. True love celebrates a partner's autonomy and respects their choices, even when those choices cause pain. Possession, however, treats another person as an object to be owned and controlled at all costs. Shaw's inability to distinguish between these concepts sealed both their fates. In his distorted mind, Kelvy's decision to leave wasn't her exercising basic human rights. It was theft of something that belonged to him. This warped thinking justified increasingly extreme measures to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. When manipulation failed, Shaw prepared to use the ultimate form of control, violence that would ensure Kelvy could never leave him again. Use Day, the day before Kelvy McRae would lose her life, should have been the day the system saved her. Instead, it became a horrifying preview of the violence that was about to explode. What happened in those 24 hours between Kelvy's desperate call for help and her murder represents one of the most tragic failures of our justice system. The terror began when Shaw's desperation reached a boiling point. Unable to accept that Kelvy had moved on with her life, he resorted to the tactics that abusers use when they feel their control slipping away. What started as another argument quickly escalated into a life-threatening assault that should have been Kelvy's final warning to run as far away as possible. The attack was brutal and calculated. Shaw wrapped his hands around Kelvy's throat, cutting off her air supply in an act of strangulation that could have killed her right then and there. But he wasn't finished. He pressed a loaded gun directly against her head, making it crystal clear that he held her life in his hands. For terrifying minutes, Kelvy was held against her will, trapped with someone who had crossed every line between love and violence. Shaw had transformed from an ex-boyfriend into a captor, using fear and the threat of death to try to force her back into submission. This wasn't a moment of passion or anger. This was calculated terrorism designed to break her spirit completely. When Kelvy finally saw an opportunity to escape, she ran to her car, desperate to get away from the nightmare her home had become. But Shaw wasn't about to let her go that easily. In a moment that perfectly captured his unhinged mental state, he threw his entire body onto her car's windshield as she tried to drive away. The impact completely shattered the glass, creating a spider web of cracks that mirrored the fractured state of their relationship. This wasn't just property damage. It was a public display of his willingness to destroy anything and everything to maintain control over Kelvy. The shattered windshield became a physical symbol of how far Shaw was prepared to go to prevent her from leaving. Despite the terror she had just endured, Kelvy found the courage to do what so many victims struggle to do. She called 911, her voice shaking but determined. She reported the assault, the strangulation, the gun, and the false imprisonment. She gave police every detail they needed to understand the severity of Shaw's escalating violence. The responding officers took her report seriously, documenting the evidence of Shaw's crimes. Within hours, he was facing multiple serious charges: false imprisonment, aggravated assault, and battery. On paper, the system appeared to be working exactly as it should. Kelvy had reported the abuse, police had responded appropriately, and her attacker was facing the full weight of the law for his actions. But here's where the system catastrophically failed Kelvy McRae. Despite facing charges for strangulation, pointing a gun at her head, and holding her against her will, Shaw was somehow still free to return to the same home where Kelvy lived. The very person who had just demonstrated his willingness to kill her was allowed to maintain access to his victim. This represents a fundamental breakdown in victim protection. When someone has already escalated to strangulation and gun threats, they have crossed into the most dangerous category of domestic abusers. Research shows that strangulation is one of the strongest predictors of eventual homicide in domestic violence cases. Yet somehow, Shaw remained free to complete what he had started just 24 hours earlier. Have you ever wondered why someone would stay in this situation? The answer might surprise you, and it could save a life. Kelvy didn't stay because she was weak or because she enjoyed the abuse. She stayed because leaving is often the most dangerous time for domestic violence victims, and because the system that should have protected her left her vulnerable. When your abuser lives in your home, knows your routines, and has already demonstrated a willingness to kill, where exactly are you supposed to go? How do you rebuild your entire life overnight, while someone who wants you dead has unrestricted access to hunt you down? Kelvy was trapped in an impossible situation that millions of women face every single day across America. Wednesday evening started like countless others for Kelvy McCrae. After surviving the terror of the previous day, she was trying to maintain some sense of normalcy in her life. She connected with 3 of her friends through FaceTime, seeking the comfort and distraction that only close friendships can provide. The call began with the usual chatter, updates about their days, shared laughs, and the kind of casual conversation that helps heal emotional wounds. For Kelvy, this moment of connection with her friends represented a brief escape from the nightmare that her home life had become. She was doing what 18-year-olds do, talking with friends, sharing stories, and trying to move forward with her life. None of them could have predicted that this ordinary Wednesday evening call would become the most traumatic experience of their young lives. What started as a routine conversation between friends was about to transform into a front-row seat to unthinkable violence. The beauty of technology is that it connects us across distances, allowing us to share moments with people we care about even when we can't be physically together. Kelvy's friends could see her face, hear her voice, and feel like they were right there with her despite being miles away. It was supposed to be a safe space where she could laugh, vent, and just be herself. But technology also has a dark side. It can force us to witness things we were never meant to see. As the friends chatted and caught up on their lives, none of them noticed the danger approaching in the background. Shaw was moving through the house, his mind made up about what he was going to do next. The casual tone of their conversation was about to be shattered by an act of violence so sudden and brutal that it would haunt these young people for the rest of their lives. Then Shaw appeared on screen. At first, it might have seemed like just another interruption, an ex-boyfriend walking into frame during a video call. But the friends on the other end of that FaceTime call quickly realized this was something entirely different. There was something in Shaw's demeanor, something in the way he moved, that signaled imminent danger. What happened next unfolded in real time before the horrified eyes of 3 young people who were powerless to help their friend. They watched as Shaw raised his weapon, and in that split second, they understood exactly what was about to happen. They could see Kelvy's face, could witness her terror, but there was absolutely nothing they could do to save her. The distance that had seemed so small moments before suddenly became an insurmountable barrier. They were connected by technology, but separated by miles that might as well have been oceans when it came to protecting someone they cared about. The gunshots rang out through their phone speakers with devastating clarity. Shaw fired multiple rounds at close range, each shot designed to ensure that Kelvy would never escape him again. The first bullet struck her in the head, followed by shots to her back and neck. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of temporary insanity. This was an execution carried out by someone who had decided that if he couldn't control Kelvy's life, he would control her death. The friends on the FaceTime call watched in absolute horror as the young woman they had been laughing with just moments before collapsed from the brutal assault. The screen that had been filled with Kelvy's bright smile was now showing a scene of unimaginable violence. They were witnessing their friend's murder in real time, trapped behind their phone screens, screaming helplessly as the worst possible thing unfolded before their eyes. After destroying the life of the woman he claimed to love, Shaw turned the gun on himself. In the ultimate act of cowardice, he fired a single shot to his own head. This wasn't remorse or sudden realization of what he had done. This was the final act of control from someone who refused to face the consequences of his actions. Shaw collapsed against the wall of the home that had become a crime scene, his self-inflicted wound leaving him critically injured but still alive. While Kelvy lay dying from multiple gunshot wounds, her killer remained conscious enough to potentially survive his own cowardly attempt to escape justice. The friends on the FaceTime call were left staring at a screen showing 2 bodies, one innocent victim and one murderer, both bleeding out in what should have been Kelvy's safe space. The call that had started with laughter had ended with the most traumatic scene imaginable. Emergency responders rushed both Kelvy and Shaw to the hospital, racing against time to save two lives that hung in the balance. But the damage Shaw had inflicted on Kelvy was too severe. Despite the best efforts of medical professionals, the 18-year-old model and entrepreneur succumbed to her injuries. Her dreams, her future, her infectious smile, all of it was gone because one man couldn't accept that she had the right to choose her own path. Shaw, meanwhile, initially survived a self-inflicted wound. Even in his attempt to escape justice through suicide, he had failed. Police were able to charge him with first-degree murder while he lay in his hospital bed, ensuring that he would face the full weight of the law for what he had done to Kelvy. But justice would take an unexpected turn. The next day, Shaw died from his injuries, taking with him any chance for Kelvy's family to see him face trial. The psychological trauma inflicted on Kelvy's three friends cannot be overstated. These young people had been forced to witness the murder of someone they cared about, watching helplessly as violence unfolded in real time through their phone screens. They had heard the gunshots, seen the aftermath, and experienced the absolute helplessness of being unable to save their friend. The guilt they must have felt, wondering if they could have done something different, if they should have called police faster, if there was any way they could have prevented what happened, is a burden no one should ever have to carry. These friends became unwilling witnesses to one of the most intimate and brutal crimes imaginable, forever changed by what they saw that Wednesday evening. Their trauma extends far beyond that single horrific moment. Every time they use FaceTime, every time they hear a phone ring, they're likely transported back to that night when technology connected them to unspeakable violence. Despite the trauma they had endured, one of the witnesses found the strength to help bring justice for Kelvy. When police conducted their investigation, this brave friend was able to positively identify Shaw from a photo lineup, confirming what they had witnessed during that horrific FaceTime call. This identification was crucial for the case, providing law enforcement with the eyewitness testimony needed to establish exactly what had happened in those final moments of Kelvy's life. Even though Shaw had died before he could face trial, the witness testimony ensured that the official record would reflect the truth, that Kelvy McCrae was murdered by her ex-boyfriend in a calculated act of domestic violence. The friend's willingness to relive that traumatic night by cooperating with police demonstrated incredible courage. They understood that their testimony was essential not just for Kelvy's case, but potentially for helping other victims of domestic violence by ensuring this crime was properly documented and classified. When the investigation concluded, police officially classified Kelvy McCrae's death as a murder-suicide. This clinical term barely captures the devastating reality of what happened. A young woman with unlimited potential was executed by someone who claimed to love her, simply because she dared to choose freedom over fear. Murder-suicides in domestic violence cases follow a predictable and horrifying pattern. The perpetrator decides that if they cannot possess their victim completely, then no one can. It's the ultimate act of control, ensuring that the victim can never truly escape, never find happiness with someone else, and never live the independent life they fought so hard to achieve. Shaw's actions weren't impulsive or emotional. They were the calculated final move of someone who had been escalating toward this moment for months. The statistics surrounding domestic violence escalation are both predictable and terrifying. Research consistently shows that the period immediately following a breakup is when abused women face the highest risk of being killed by their partners. This isn't coincidence. It's the inevitable result of how abusive minds operate when they lose control. Studies indicate that a woman's risk of homicide increases by 750% in the weeks and months after leaving an abusive relationship. When you add strangulation to the equation, as happened with Kelvy just 24 hours before her murder, the risk becomes even more astronomical. Strangulation is considered one of the strongest predictors of eventual homicide in domestic violence cases. Shaw had already demonstrated every warning sign that experts use to identify potentially lethal abusers, yet the system failed to protect Kelvy. The psychology behind post-breakup lethality reveals the twisted logic that drives men like Shaw to murder. When an abuser's primary source of power and control is suddenly removed, They experience what experts call separation assault. This isn't about love or passion. It's about ownership and the refusal to accept that another human being has autonomy. Shaw couldn't tolerate the idea that Kelvy would continue living, laughing, and thriving without him. In his distorted worldview, her independence was theft of something that belonged to him. The breakup represented the ultimate loss of control, triggering a desperate need to reassert dominance through the most extreme means possible. This explains why so many domestic violence murders happen after the victim has already left. The abuser would rather destroy what they can't control. Technology played a devastating role in Kelvy's murder, transforming what should have been a private moment with friends into a public execution witnessed by multiple people. Shaw knew that Kelvy was on FaceTime with her friends, yet he chose to carry out his attack anyway. This suggests a level of calculated cruelty that goes beyond typical domestic violence. By murdering Kelvy while she was connected to others, Shaw ensured maximum psychological damage. He didn't just kill one person. He traumatized everyone who witnessed the attack through their screens. The friends who watched helplessly as their loved one was murdered will carry that trauma for the rest of their lives. Modern technology has given abusers new tools for surveillance, harassment, and control, while simultaneously creating new ways to inflict lasting psychological damage on entire networks of people. The living situation that trapped Kelvy illustrates one of the most dangerous aspects of modern domestic violence. When victims and abusers share the same space, escape becomes nearly impossible. Kelvy's decision to let Shaw stay in her home after their breakup, while compassionate, created the perfect storm for tragedy. This arrangement gave Shaw unrestricted access to monitor Kelvy's activities, control her environment, and plan his final attack. He knew her routines, her vulnerabilities, and exactly when she would be most defenseless. The home that should have been Kelvy's sanctuary became her prison, and ultimately, her execution chamber. Many victims face this same impossible choice: allow their abuser to remain in shared housing due to financial constraints, or risk homelessness while trying to escape. Society offers few viable alternatives for women in Kelvy's position. The 24-hour window between Kelvy's assault and her murder represents a catastrophic system failure that cost a young woman her life. Despite Shaw facing serious charges, including strangulation, false imprisonment, and aggravated assault, he remained free to access his victim. This gap in protection is where too many domestic violence cases turn fatal. Emergency protective orders, immediate detention, and victim relocation should have been automatic responses to Shaw's escalating violence. Instead, the very person who had demonstrated his willingness to kill Kelvy was allowed to complete what he had started. The system treated Shaw's crimes as isolated incidents rather than recognizing the clear pattern of escalation toward homicide. Kelvy did everything right. She reported the abuse, cooperated with police, and sought help. The system failed her when she needed it most. Kelvy McRae's story serves as a devastating cautionary tale about the realities of domestic violence in America. Her case demonstrates that being young, successful, and connected to a supportive community offers no protection against an abuser determined to maintain control. It shows that reporting abuse to authorities doesn't guarantee safety, and that the most dangerous time for victims is often after they've taken steps to protect themselves. Her murder also highlights how quickly domestic violence can escalate from psychological abuse to lethal violence. The progression from controlling behavior to strangulation to murder happened within months, following a pattern that experts recognize, but that our legal system consistently fails to interrupt effectively. Every aspect of Kelvy's case, from the shared living situation to the post-breakup escalation, represents missed opportunities to save her life. Kelvy McRae's tragic death cannot be in vain if we use her story to save other lives. The warning signs that preceded her murder are recognizable and predictable, which means they're also preventable if we know what to look for and how to respond. Understanding these red flags could mean the difference between life and death for someone you know. The escalation pattern that killed Kelvy follows a deadly roadmap that abusers use repeatedly. It starts with emotional control, progresses to physical intimidation, escalates to strangulation and weapon threats, and culminates in homicide when the victim tries to leave. Recognizing where someone falls on this continuum is crucial for determining the level of danger they face. If your partner has ever put their hands around your neck, threatened you with a weapon, or prevented you from leaving during an argument, you are in immediate danger of being killed. These aren't just warning signs. They're emergency sirens that demand immediate action. Research shows that once an abuser escalates to strangulation, the victim's risk of homicide increases by 750%. Breaking up with an abusive partner requires careful planning and professional support. Never attempt to leave without a safety plan that includes secure housing, financial resources, and legal protection. Contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 before making any moves. They can help you develop a personalized escape strategy that minimizes your risk of retaliation. Create a safety network of trusted friends and family members who understand the danger you're facing. Share your location with multiple people. Establish check-in protocols, and never meet your abuser alone after the breakup. If possible, change your phone number, social media accounts, and daily routines to make it harder for them to track your movements. Legal protections like restraining orders and emergency protective orders can provide some deterrence, but they're not bulletproof shields. Many abusers violate these orders, and enforcement can be inconsistent. While you should absolutely pursue legal protection, never rely on it as your only safety measure. Have backup plans for when the system fails. Technology can be both a weapon and a shield in domestic violence situations. Video calls like FaceTime can serve as digital witnesses, as they did in Kelvy's case. If you're forced to interact with your abuser, try to have witnesses present either in person or virtually. Record conversations when legally permissible, and save threatening text messages or voicemails as evidence. Download emergency apps like Be Safe or Red Panic Button that can instantly alert your safety network and law enforcement with your exact location. Keep your phone charged and accessible at all times. Consider carrying a second phone that your abuser doesn't know about for emergency communications. Document everything. Take photos of injuries, save threatening messages, and keep detailed records of incidents with dates and times. This evidence could be crucial for obtaining legal protection or prosecuting your abuser. Store this documentation in a secure location that your abuser cannot access. If someone you know is in Kelvy's situation, don't wait for them to ask for help. Abusers isolate their victims and make them feel like they have nowhere to turn. Reach out consistently, offer specific assistance like temporary housing or transportation, and connect them with professional resources. Your support could be the lifeline that saves their life. Never judge someone for staying in an abusive relationship or returning to their abuser. The average victim leaves 7 times before permanently escaping, and each attempt increases their risk of being killed. Instead of criticism, offer unconditional support and practical assistance that makes leaving safer and more feasible. If you or someone you know is in a similar situation, please reach out. Your life is worth more than any relationship. The National Domestic Violence Hotline provides free, confidential support 24 hours a day at 1-800-799-7233. Local women's shelters, police departments, and victim advocacy organizations can also provide immediate assistance and safety planning. Kelvy McCrae was an intelligent, successful young woman with everything to live for. Her dreams of building a beauty empire, inspiring others through social media, and living life on her own terms were cut short by someone who couldn't accept her autonomy. We honor her memory not through grief alone, but through action that prevents other families from experiencing this devastating loss. Let Kelvy's story be the wake-up call that saves another life. Share this information with people who need it. Support domestic violence prevention organizations, and never ignore the warning signs when someone you care about is in danger. Every life saved in Kelvy's name ensures that her death serves a purpose greater than the violence that caused it. Like this video if it opened your eyes, share it to potentially save a life, and subscribe for more stories that matter. Your engagement helps these important stories reach people who need them most. Together, we can break the cycle of domestic violence and ensure that no one else suffers Kelvy McCrae's fate.